Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next installment of the Indigenous Film Series. We are so excited for tonight's program. I'm Celine. I'm a program specialist with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and we have a fantastic program in store for you. I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to Jean, who will let you know a little more about the series and about tonight's program. But as you are listening today, I am going to let you all know I'll be watching the chat. You might not be able to see each other's chats, but we will be able to see them. And Jean and Merv can ask Jackie questions later tonight from that chat. So go ahead and ask any questions that pop up as you are listening. Jean?
Welcome to the opening night of our 17th annual Indigenous Film and Arts Festival. I'm Jean Rubin. I direct the festival, which is presented by the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management. And with me tonight is Merv Tano. He's our Institute president. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science has been hosting film events for us for many years. And we want to thank them for providing this online platform so that we can have our first virtual festival. It's our 17th year, but our first year as a virtual event. So thank you, Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We could not bring you the festival without the support of our many community partners and sponsors. As you were logging in, you saw the logo screen scrolling so you could see all of our sponsors and community partners. I'd like to acknowledge some of the major sponsors at this time. We want to extend our thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts and Society, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Colorado Creative Industries, Kanika Minolta, AARP, and the Consulate General of Canada in Denver. Thank you. So this is where I usually pause so the audience can applaud, but this is a very quiet way to do it. So you can type it, you can type in your applause and thank you sponsors. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Most of you have already seen the film Okpik stream. It's been streaming for the past week and it will stream for one more day. So if you haven't seen it, you still can log in through tomorrow to watch the film. The film is about the life of Harry Okpik, a dog musher from Nunavut in northern Canada. With us tonight is Jacqueline Issei, who grew up in Nikolai, Alaska, a small village on the Iditarod Trail. Her family have been dog mushers for many generations. And we asked Jackie to be a part of our program tonight so she could share her stories and experiences, provide some insight on a whole range of issues related to dog mushing and things that impact dog mushing in Alaska. And we hope this provides some additional insight for you following the film. So to get started, I'm going to ask Jackie to tell us a little bit about growing up in Nikolai, her decision to leave, what she's doing today. I'll then turn it over to Merv to start the conversation with a few questions. But as Selena said, you can type in your questions at any time. So Jackie, the mic is yours.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie Issei. Thanks for the introduction, Jean. I'd really like to thank you and Merv and the International Institute of Indigenous Resource Management, the Indigenous Film and Arts Festival, the Denver American Indian Commission, and definitely the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Thank you so much. I will add one thing. I'm not a great public speaker, and I know this is virtual, but I tend to kind of get a little shy, so I'll do my best for all of you. So bear with me. But so as to my background, I grew up in the tribal village of Nikolai, Alaska, which is on the Kuskokwim River. It's primarily my tribe, which is Athabaskan from the interior of Alaska. There's about 100 of us left of what you could call my particular band, speaking a very similar dialect. Traditionally nomadic, primarily settled down when the schools came. I think that was probably when my mother was a small child. She went to, I think it was the second grade, and my father went to the fourth before they resumed their normal subsistence Athabascan activities. And a big part of that was dog mushing. They grew up prior to snowmobiles, and they were raised with dog teams. But even in the summertime, like people think of dog mushing, and of course you've got a sled. But as part of the nomadic lifestyle, in the summertime, the dogs would carry the packs. They wouldn't necessarily pull anything, but when the family went up to the mountains, for example, for the hunting season of big game, caribou, black bear, brown bear, Dall sheep, moose had just started to come across the Alaska range at that time, so they were able to harvest that. That was traditional for the dogs in the summer, but in the winter, we would hook them up to sleds and they would pull. We didn't have cars, we didn't have roads, certainly didn't have airplanes or boat, well, kayaks and, you know, dugout canoes, but not quite the same thing. So yeah, the dogs were a big intrinsic part of our life. And yeah, that was the traditional background for interior Alaskan dog mushing. Did you want to ask a couple questions, Merv?
Well, can you just tell people what you're doing today?
Oh yes, I went to DU, University of Denver in Colorado for my undergrad. Got a business degree. Worked for a few years. I was a copywriter, and then I went to law school at Yale. Worked in the law for a few years, clerked for the Supreme Court back in Alaska, which was a fantastic experience. I was a securities litigator at a large law firm in California. That was a great learning experience. And I did a little bit of tribal law in Colorado for a small boutique firm, which I absolutely enjoyed. But ultimately the law wasn't for me. So then I became president of a military contracting company for 3 years. And then after that, I just kind of got back into one of the family businesses of art and artifact appraisals, which is what I do now. And I'm currently down in Austin, Texas. So there's in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. Summer?
Okay. The International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management is, besides doing these great films, is a law and policy research institute.
Right.
And one of the reasons I love this film is, for me, it's just a perfect example, a great illustration of this principle we hear all the time out in Indian country, that everything is connected. And Jackie, you know, we had a discussion about this earlier. Now, you got dogs, and you race the dogs, you use the dogs. The dogs are an essential part of, it used to be for sure an essential part of life there. And yet, it is that whole relationship between you all and the dogs is also inextricably linked to your ability to pursue a subsistence lifestyle, and more specifically, accessing or harvesting salmon. And so the question is, could you explain a little bit about that linkage and talk a bit about the kinds of risk, if you will, to that relationship that's presented by activities such as mining and extractive resource development, and especially the changing climate?
Okay. Well, I'll start at the beginning. Yes, having dogs is it's a lot of work, and these are not small dogs. And currently, I think we have, as a team, I think it's 14 to maybe 16 full-size adult huskies right now. So feeding those dogs every day is a lot of work. a big part of that, and that's not just including, we have a couple of bear dogs, which are what they sound like. We take them bear hunting because they're good about protecting us when we're bear hunting. So just to back to the team though, a good portion of every summer, I would say maybe 2 months, give or take, is spent at what's called Blackwater, which is my mother's fish camp, which is where we harvest salmon every summer. And a big part of that is harvesting what we call dog salmon. I don't think that's what they're actually called. I think that maybe they're called keto salmon in the store, but we call them dog salmon, and primarily because that's what we feed the dogs. And this was a traditional source of food too, you know, when my mother was young. So you'd spend a big portion at fish camp setting the net, catching the fish, preserving it so that you could, you know, continue to use it. And that has absolutely been impacted by climate change. We're seeing differences in the salmon runs. We have some years that are very bad. And it's linked to all sorts of things. You know, the ocean is warming up, the salmon are not. Their entire life cycle is disrupted by a warming ocean. As for extractive industries, it hasn't penetrated, or we do have a gold mine near our tribal lands, but that hasn't influenced the actual fish that I'm aware of. But they are talking about, there is a mine that's under consideration. I forget the name of it. I think it might be.
It's the Pebble Mine.
It's the Pebble Mine, right. They just completed, was it a comment period on that? And that would absolutely affect the fishery ground right on the coast where they're planning on putting that. And that is a big and tangled subject. The other thing, this is maybe not something you thought about, is that, and one of the reasons that some people are for it is of course job creation. And I bring this up only because in terms of dog mushing, people who are busy working jobs don't, you know, it would be almost extremely difficult to maintain a team. That's just the way it would work. So just purely from a dog mushing and dog team perspective, that aspect would actually present a challenge, let alone, you know, the environmental impact of all of that. And then going back to, we talked about, so subsistence lifestyle, it's common for people to go to fish camp, but it's not super common anymore for people to have dog teams back home. I think in a group of 4 villages that are clustered in our area, there's ours, and then there are, I have heard maybe 1 or 2 others. They're just a lot of work to maintain and it's to feed. So yeah, that's been interesting. And then, am I missing anything? I tried to, has there anything that I haven't hit on?
No, but could you say a little bit about how you use the salmon to feed the dogs?
Sure. The dog salmon specifically, we don't eat. It's really all for the dogs. You preserve it and then you just sort of feed it to them. It's a good source of food for them. It won't last all year. Frankly, we do have to also purchase dog food. And my younger brother spends a lot of time cooking that up for the dogs in a massive pot outside. I think it was an old metal 50-gallon drum. So they don't just eat the fish, they'll eat dog food as well. And this is actually an important aspect of the Alaskan Huskies that I don't know if people have taken into consideration, but what you want in a husky, especially a mushing husky, a working dog, is a dog with a ravenous appetite. You can't have a picky eater. You need a dog that if you're out on the trail and you get what you get, that dog has to be willing and able to scarf that down. A picky eater would not be a good member of a team. So yeah, so does that address it a little more?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Can I go?
Yeah.
So when we talked the other day, we were talking about the fact that Nikolai is on the Iditarod Trail.
Right.
and what that has meant in terms of economics and, with the race and not years when you can't have the race. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe
Sure.
for folks who don't already know, explain what the Iditarod Trail is?
Okay, yeah. Just quick background on the Iditarod Trail. It's based on a 1925 serum run. There was a diphtheria epidemic in the native village of Nome, which is a coastal village. And at that time, you couldn't just, they weren't able to fly it in, and the town was iced over. The coast was iced in, so you couldn't get the diphtheria serum there via boat. So they engineered, I can't remember the names of the people at the time, but they organized a relay of across these towns to get this serum via dog team from, I forget it's not Anchorage, but I can't remember the town, how far they got it. It might've been Nenana, Alaska. From there, they had to do a relay. And this was extraordinary. I mean, the temperatures they faced, I want to say at least 50 below zero. You can read about it. It's just fascinating. And they got there and they managed to deliver the serum, and they saved the residents of Nome from this disease that I think would have just wiped them out. So what ended up happening was I think it was 1970, maybe 1973. Yeah, 1973. Was the first Iditarod, although I think it was called something different at the time, but it was to partially to commemorate that, but also kind of organized to bring dog mushing back culturally, because dog mushing had seen a decrease, I think starting around the 60s, as snowmobiles kind of came into the area, came into Alaska. A snowmobile, you just give it some gas. Gas wasn't super expensive in those days. And, dogs, like I said, you've got to feed. And so people were able to conduct their same activities, but without having to rely on an entire team of dogs, which a typical size, I think my mother was telling me in those days, was about 12 or 13 dogs per family. And so they decided to create this race to commemorate that serum run. And then also they had a big purse. I don't remember what the purse was. I want to say it was a pretty significant amount. And it got a lot of people interested. They had around 50 dog teams that entered. I cannot remember the name of the gentleman who won. I believe he was Yupik or Inuppaq. From there, they've had it every year. Although over the years it's changed. Sometimes they have the route, what they call the northern route and the southern route. They're pretty close in distance, but it allows the race to shift through different villages, depending on which is kind of really nice for the villages. They get sort of an influx of tourism, which is very cool. They get some tourist dollars. There are bed and breakfasts in some of those towns, sometimes little hotels. And just, they get reporters coming through. And then it's also, the Iditarod has also spawned other events over the years. We have what we call the Iron Dog, which takes place right before the Iditarod, and that's a snowmobile race that follows, I think it's roughly the same track. And so that's got an entire economy that surrounds it as well. And then after the Iditarod comes through, we have, I think they call it Idita Sport or Idita Riders, but it's people who just go through on bicycles, which is amazing, or they walk it, also amazing. I mean, just different ways of traversing the trail. And so it's brought people into sort of the heart of Alaska and remote villages that normally would not have ventured there. So it's had a major impact, I think, on these village economies. Some of them have little grocery stores, very small, like, maybe just in the porch of somebody's cabin, for example, is a little grocery store, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things that that interests me is that dogs and horses, thoroughbred horses, for example, are similar in the sense that you know, it takes a lot of effort in the case of well, the thoroughbred. It takes a lot of money to breed these horses. But the paradigm is the same, or the formula, or however you want to look at it. I mean, you're looking for certain kinds of characteristics of an animal.
Right.
And you know, I don't know if there's a difference between being a lead dog. The characteristics are different from a lead dog as opposed to a let's call them a follower dog.
Sure.
And so the question I have is, what do you look for when,
Sure.
when you're breeding these animals?
Well, there are a few. So breeding is separate from lead versus the rest of the team. I'll start with breeding. I'll give you just a little bit of background on the dogs that are raised in Alaska, or what we call, I guess you could call them Alaskan Huskies. Traditionally, what we had was Malamutes, massive Malamutes. But what you see now in the races like the Iditarod, the Yukon Quest, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's from, I think it's Fairbanks to Whitehorse, Canada. It's about 1,000 miles or so. So that's another major one, but the dogs look different. And the reason is because in the, when the gold rush began back in Alaska, with so many people flooding to Alaska, they needed work dogs. And so people from other states and other areas were selling dogs and sending them up there. And in the mining camps, there wasn't a lot of control, I think, exercised at the time over the dogs breeding. And so today's Alaskan Huskies are a mix of just a wide, untold variety of dogs. And it was in the mining camps in the winter times. Things were a little slow. It's the dark of winter. It's extremely cold. And the miners and so forth started to race their dogs. And over time, kennels developed. And in that case, different kennels would breed for different things. Partly it had to do with where you were located. If you were located in the warmer part of Alaska, the south, for example, you would want a different type of hair on your dog than you would if you were further north. So it had to do with the environment. But the dogs that you see today, there are certain things that you look for and that we now do breed for. You want tight toes, tight feet, like tight paws. You don't want webbed. So not like a water dog, you know how they have the webbing? Because on the ice that can cut, could crack, they can get snow and ice packed in there. So you want a tight foot with a thick pad so that they can run up to 70 miles a day, for example. They need to be able to keep going on their feet. And you want a dog with a deep chest cavity because they need that, lung capacity to keep going, to keep traveling for that length of time. And you want dogs that are long and lean, and then you want long legs as well. And then again, just to touch on a ravenous eater, that's important. You want a good appetite, ready to eat anything. So you look for that too. And now I'll touch on leaders, leaders versus the rest of the team. You can typically tell who will make a good leader when they're puppies. They'll be the ones that are independent. They're gonna wanna go out on their own. They might be the first one to explore things like stairs. They'll pay attention to your voice. If you call them, they'll turn, they'll respond, they'll start to learn their name. They'll pay attention to interacting with you. And they're just gonna be, you're gonna see that intelligence and that adventurous spirit in them. And then another thing is, when you first put a you know that's going to be a good leader. I mean, and that's part of what you would look for in a sled dog, is a dog that wants to pull. We've seen the film, and you can see the excitement of Mr. Okpik's dogs when he's got them in harness, and just how they are ready to go and they are just pulling. You can see their exuberance, and that's what you look for in a sled dog. So yeah.
You know, what we saw in the film, the dogs all look not only friendly with Harry Okpik, but also friendly with each other.
Yeah,
So
they're a
a dog
team.
that you know, that's not sociable with the other dogs, that you just have to say this dog isn't going to be part of, you know, can't be part of our team?
Oh, absolutely not every dog is going to be a good mushing dog. Might make a great house dog, you know, it might make a great pet. And a lot of people back home still have 1 or 2 huskies, and they're their pets, you know. They'll take them out hunting, they'll take them out, you know, fishing, or just have around the house. But yeah, you're looking for the dogs that will be happily part of a team.
So you've mentioned a couple of times about these ravenous eaters. It resonates with me. I feel like I could be a good sled dog in that respect. But could you talk a little bit about like on these long races, you know, 600 miles, 1,000-mile races, what you have to do to stage the feeding of the dogs?
Sure. These ones, each musher will have drop bags that they will be brought into the checkpoints along the race. And these are places where mushers actually check in to say, hi, I'm here, I've completed this portion, you know. And they can pick up their drop bags, which will include any gear they need. It could be batteries for their headlamps. It could be dog booties. Sometimes they put that on them. Food, definitely dog food. And so straw, like they'll have bales of straw for the bedding for their dogs to sleep on at night and rest on. And yeah, just sort of equipment. And then I don't know about the Yukon Quest, but I do know that with regarding the Iditarod, they have this last portion of it called sort of like a sprint, where everybody's just going so they can get to the finish line. There are mushers who will have special lightweight sleds actually waiting at the checkpoint prior to that, and hook their teams up to that so they can just go. So yeah, it's a big, massive logistical undertaking. And in addition to teams that are from Alaska, we have teams from other parts of the country, of course, too. And then we're also seeing international teams as well. There are teams from sometimes Norway, for example, Sweden. And they're flying these dogs great distances, all the way to Anchorage, Alaska for the ceremonial start. It's not the real start, but it's kind of where the crowd can come and enjoy and participate. And they have an honorary musher that they, you know, each year, someone who's contributed quite a bit to dog mushing. And, you know, that's just kind of to build up anticipation and excitement over the race, because much of the race, unless you're standing at a checkpoint, you really won't see. They're in vast stretches of wilderness. And there's just no one but them and the dogs.
I had a question about the, if you will, the accoutrement of the of the dogs. I mean, the harnesses, the leads, etc. Traditionally, how were those fabricated? What materials were used?
My understanding is that traditionally, primarily they were pack dogs in the summer, and at least for our tribe, it would be moose hide was a big thing, caribou hide. Straps would be sewn of that kind of thing as well. The thread at the time was moose sinew. I wish I had some on hand. I could show you some, but it's like a very strong, it makes a very strong thread-like substance, and that's what they would sew them from. Oh, I see we might be getting a few questions in the chat as well.
Right.
Oh, here we go. Let's see. Gabriella. Oh, we've had dogs.
You know, why
Yeah.
don't you read the, I'm not sure. Selena, does everybody see the, is everyone seeing the questions?
Nope, only we see the question.
Oh, so
Oh, okay.
Jackie, why don't you read the question and then answer?
Sure. This is from Gabriela Chavaria, and apologies if I've mispronounced your name. In hearing you talk about the dogs and your family takes me to the film and see how the family is very engaged in the caring of the dogs from a young age. Did you always like taking care of them? I did. I've always been delighted and happy to be a participant in that. They are like family. We call them our babies. They're not just working dogs. They're members of our family. And it's a happy thing when we get a new litter of puppies. Like, there's nothing cuter. So I hope that.
Who gets to name them? Does everybody get to name some of the
Well,
dogs?
we take turns. We have a dog named Tree Dog because one of my nieces was 4 and she got to name him, and his name is Tree Dog. So they come with a variety of names. Yeah. It's just taking turns. I'm trying to think. We have a Bjorn now and a Floyd, so you never know.
So I see there's a question from Stuart. Why is it called mushing?
I don't know. I have actually never looked into that. I'm sorry to say. I'm gonna have to Google that one.
Well, we got a whole bunch of people online right now, so somebody Google it.
Yeah. If someone knows, volunteer.
Okay, you want you got another one there?
Oh, here we go. From Sandy Barnes. I'm curious about blue and bi-eyed dogs not being allowed. I've had purebred huskies with blue/bi-colored eyes. We did mini sled dog races, lots of running with only 3 to 4 dogs. I did not know about that. I assume that's a Eastern Canadian requirement because theirs is the dog population that they almost lost due to their government policies. We don't have any such requirements in Alaska because, again, I don't know if you had heard earlier, but our dogs are mixed that go back to around the 1900s from the gold rush. So we don't have those requirements, but I too was fascinated by that requirement that Mr. Okpik had mentioned for the race, which if the Ivakkak race, I think it was called, and again, I may have mispronounced that, but yeah, I think that was about keeping their race in order to continue to promote their particular breed of huskies, which I thought was pretty fantastic, and I can see why they did it.
So somebody just asked an administrative type question saying, I don't see a Q&A function. It just where you type that statement, that's where you type your question. So you're in the chat room there.
Yeah, I was just responding to you, Felix. So we don't have a Q&A like function from Zoom right now, but we are just doing the chat. So open up that chat and type them in. You might not be able to see the other folks' questions, but Jean and Jackie are doing a great job at pulling them and trying to get to as many as we can.
Thank you, Celine. So we have one more question, a little bit. This is from Norma Johnson. How long can a dog be an active sled dog? How do they feel about retirement? It's a great question. They do age out. They will get to a point where maybe it hurts their hips or their back, or it's not, comfortable for them, but they'll continue to like to be active. And we don't always make our dogs pull. Like, for example, in the summertime, we just, you may loose a few dogs and then they'll just kind of run around, or you get out on an ATV, they may like to trot alongside the ATV, take them out to our fish camp and have them out there with us. So I think they have a pretty nice retirement. They get to just play, but they do like to pull. They love to pull. So, but they will reach a retirement point. Was there another question, Jean?
There is. Sonia Ray is asking, did the dog slaughter only happen in Quebec? I think it was more, it was only in Canada. It wasn't in the US.
It didn't happen in Alaska, I know that.
But I'm not sure if it was limited. Do you know, Murph?
No, I do
I
not.
don't know that it was limited to Quebec. That's
Yeah,
another.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I had thought it was across Canada or across the northern part of Canada, because they talked about having to reconstruct the breed, that there were so few left that, in fact, I'm sorry to say, I think he said thousands of dogs were part of that, and there were very few left, and they had to start from just a very, very small amount, very small number. Do we have any more questions?
I do have an answer if anybody, I did Google it. So I only had 20 seconds to check my sources. But apparently, according to like an Alaskan tourism website, it's called mush from the French of March because of the history. And let me look back over here. English Canadians began to say mush instead because of like the French origins. So apparently that, according to alaskatours.com, that is. We'll have to double check that, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a series of questions about the slaughter of the dogs. Gabriella asking, did I miss something? He talks about the shots. No, unfortunately, you did not miss anything. They came and they slaughtered the dogs. And as he says in the film, they never got a good explanation as to why. And it's, a lot of people have speculated as to why, because they never said the dogs were sick. There was never any apparent legitimate reason. And it really seems as though it was an attempt to undermine the culture, because the dogs were so central to the culture that, it's like shooting the buffalo, right? If you get rid of the buffalo, you get rid of so many of the underpinnings of the Plains Indian culture. You get rid of the dogs, you get rid of that whole dog sledding culture. And I think it may also have been a way to encourage people to move into settlements.
Yeah, Jean, that was my impression too. You summed it up really nicely. They do never say, but those were sort of my suspicions as well. So yeah, it's very disturbing. And I told my family about it and they were just shocked, because they are, back to our tribe, such an intrinsic part of our life that if it had happened there would have been no going anywhere in the winter. I mean, just, you're locked in. The rivers are frozen. There is snow that can be extremely deep. I've seen 80 below zero. I have seen that and been in it. You really can't get far. There's, you can't go hunting in that. You can't, you're just stuck. And so, they really did sort of undermine an entire culture with that move, which, could have been their goal.
Does anybody spin the dog fur?
There are people that do. I've seen it. I've seen the wool. I've seen hats made out of it. It's very soft. No one in my particular tribe does that I know of, but I know that there are kennels where people collect the fur and create yarn and spin it and then use that to knit things. Yeah.
You had a few questions. You want to?
Oh, here we go. Dr. Bridget Engel, culturally, is there anything about these mushing events that are challenging for the small villages during the race? To be honest, not that I'm aware of. I've not heard anything negative. It's always a source of big excitement for these villages. It's a major source of excitement for the little schools. They will get together and they will they will make snacks and bake them and sell them. And, you know, the mushers are just great. They'll come in and they'll have these snacks, or not even just sell them, just give them away. You know, it's a great learning experience for the kids, and it gets them excited about mushing and about dogs. And not that I've seen. I've seen pretty much all positive, but if there's anyone attending that wants to add to that, please feel free to go ahead and type it in, and I'll read that off. So thank you for that question. Here we go. Oh, Stephanie from Colorado Yale Association. Hi, Stephanie. This is actually one of my friends. Hello. Do I have a particular dog that was my favorite? Yes, I do. Well, her name was Crystal. She was only half husky. She was half who knows what, but I had a little sled myself, and I would hook her up to that with we had Simon, Sylvia, and Stanley. They were from the same litter. They would pull, and she would be the little lead. So she was really more of a house dog, but she was half husky, and she did lead and she did pull. So yeah, that may have been my favorite dog. Okay, another question is from Felix Sanchez. How many Alaskan Native teams participate in more popular races like the Iditarod? What are the view of these races? Do they seem like cultural appropriation? They're primarily teams from Alaska. As for Alaskan Native teams, the number varies year to year. I don't know that anyone's looked at it as cultural appropriation, because the origins of the race were in the it was the diphtheria serum run that, I'm not sure if you were part of the discussion earlier, took place in 1925. That was the inspiration for the race. And then actually Joe Reddington Sr. was a key figure, actually a good friend of my father's. He's passed now, but he began in, I think, 1973, like helped to begin it along with a few other people in order to bring dog mushing back as part of the culture. And just to kind of make it popular again, because it had sort of gone by the wayside due to increased snowmobile use. It was easier for people at the time to use snowmobiles than to manage a team of what would typically have been around 12 to 13 dogs per household as working dogs, not necessarily as racing. So it was to kind of revive that. So it's, I think it's looked on very positively, and but it is difficult and it's expensive, and you have to have the time, and you have to have considerable resources to have a team of that many dogs, because they are not small dogs, and they will eat a lot. So just, you know, it takes work. Here we go. From Carrie. Will you return to Alaska, or do you see yourself staying in Denver? I'm currently in Austin, but I return to Alaska every summer and typically once a winter. So I'm there a couple times a year every year, and usually for about a month or so at a time. So yeah, pretty regularly. They can't get rid of me. And then here we go. Let's see. Is there anyone, Dr. Bridget Engel, is there anyone in your tribe or other participants who are still using traditional equipment, or is it mostly high-tech modern tools? We have a lot of homemade sleds. In fact, one of my brothers made a small sled for his daughters. It's a miniature sled that he made by hand that they can hook their dog up to and mush it, just to teach them. But there are still people that do have traditional sleds that you would make with sinew and that kind of thing. Professional racers, like in the Iditarod, for example, racing sleds, those are different. Those are typically modern materials, and they're just lightweight, they're durable. It's a different thing than having a sled that you would use for example, taking the dogs out on the trap line. If you wanted to take your dog team instead of a snowmobile to check your trap line, you would just use not a racing sled.
So while you're talking about sleds, could you say something about what you do when there's no snow?
Well, we don't race and we don't mush when there's no snow. And in fact, there were 2 recent years, just going back to the Iditarod, I think it's 2015 and 2017, there wasn't enough snow in the Anchorage area for the race to commence. And they moved it all the way up north to Fairbanks, which I'm not sure of the mileage, but is about 8 hours by car. So they had to move it significantly north up into the Arctic Circle to continue the race. And so when that, in terms of races, yeah, no snow has a major impact. In terms of the dogs themselves, you know, you can still, if you want to give them exercise, you can put an ATV into neutral, hook them up and they'll pull, or you can just take them out and they'll just run. So yeah.
I got a question.
Mhm.
How much wood do you have to chop to smoke the fish?
To smoke the fish? Oh, it's a fair amount. I mean, it depends on how much fish you have, and it depends on how much you want to smoke, because some people will just go ahead and fillet it and freeze it, you know, so you can just, but it depends on smoking it. But it's quite a lot, and people have specific types that they like. A big favorite is alder because of the flavor that the smoke imparts. But that's quite a lot of work. And then just, you know, in terms of chopping wood in the wintertime, you cook the dog food, well, we do outside. And so you've got to have a very significant wood pile to cook the dog food every day. And this is not a small amount of food for 14 dogs. And then in addition, these are not just, you know, in addition to the other dogs. And so, and then there's the wood to heat the houses, which we still use wood stoves in our cabins. And then we still have our steam baths, which have their own wood that you feed every day in order to create a steam bath. So it's a significant amount. It's a large endeavor. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of work being native.
It's a lot of work being native.
So Norma Johnson shared some information about a group called Ivakkak. She describes as an organization mandated to protect the rights, interests, and financial compensation provided by the 1975 James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. Whoops, scrolling on me. But they made a film called Echo of the Last Howl, which is a documentary about the dog killings. So if folks want, I'm sure if you Google Echo of the Last Howl, you can find it. But it's on the Ivakkak.org website.
I also just linked it into the chat for anybody who's curious.
Okay. Felix has a question. What was the impetus for the film? Why do you feel Harry's story had to be told? Jackie's not the filmmaker. Harry was up in north of Quebec in Eastern Canada. But the filmmaker, Lauren Rietvold, she was a corporate executive doing media marketing and decided it wasn't her calling. And she decided to follow her dream, which was to make documentary film. And this was the first film she made. And I'm not sure how she connected initially with Harry, but the connection was really resonated with her, that she was embarking on a path to realize her dream. And here was a story about Harry, who had embarked upon a path to realize his dream, his dream of having his father's dogs and having his own dog team. And then, as we see in the movie, his father's dogs were part of the dog slaughter. And so he thought that dream was lost. But then later in life, he decided to follow that dream. So that's a little bit of backstory I have on making of the film.
Let's see. Thanks, Jean. Yeah. let's see. Okay, from Tim Wilson. So are you planting trees to replace those cut for fuel? No, we don't. We are fortunate not to have to. Our family owns, I'm not sure how many 100 acres of land in the interior that's just completely undeveloped. And so if we didn't keep it cut, it would quickly forest over. In addition, it does kind of help with the wildfire risk. I don't know if most people are aware of the extreme fire danger in Alaska. It doesn't often come up in the news because it's not as populous, for example, as California or Oregon or Washington or Colorado. And so we just let them burn typically, unless they're going to threaten, of course, lives or structures. And so there is no shortage of wood in the interior of Alaska for us to use for our personal purposes. It's not commercial by any means. And so, yeah, that's, but a good question. And thank you for raising that.
So that's another logistical challenge then, right? Is
Oh yeah.
not just the cutting of the wood, but hauling it back home.
Yeah, we have to, we also have to plan ahead. Typically you can score the wood, which has the tree, it'll die and then it'll dry. And then you come back to harvest it later. This is something that you plan ahead and do. And then after felling the tree, you've got to go ahead and like chop it up. Typically, you can put it in your boat, get it all the way back, put it in a trailer behind the four-wheeler or into a sled behind a snowmobile, for example, haul it all the way. And then then once it's there, you've got to chop it. So yeah, there's no shortage of ways to stay in shape back home. And then you've got to pile it up, and yeah, when you want to burn it, you pack it into your house or into your steam bath or to the fire for the dog pot.
And then you ravenously eat whatever is put in front of you.
Right.
I was thinking after that, you go to the gym, right?
Right, yeah, oh yeah, we work out. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. How many, Dr. Bridget Engel, how many generations has mushing been in your family? Our family's not aware of a time that we didn't have dogs. My mom talks about growing up, and this was when they were strictly living off the land at that time. I mean, the dogs had packs in the summer, and that's how they would transport things from where we spent our summers fishing up to our fall time camps in the winter. And they would just put these things in the packs on the dogs, and the people would also have packs, and you would just walk from the lowlands into the mountains. And in the winter, my mom tells stories about when she was a little girl. My grandmother had, I think, I don't know how many kids. Her husband had died. She had 13 dogs that she managed and fed because they ran the trap line for her. And it was just the way that she was raised. And there was no memory of it, of not having had them. They were sort of just companions. So I'm not aware of how many generations it goes back, but I'm willing to say it's quite a long time.
So is there anything, oh, we'll go there. I see another question. Are there any traditional stories about the origins of dogs?
Not that I know of. I've never heard any, but that's a good question. And it motivates me to go ahead and ask my family about that. Thank you for that question. That's great. I'm actually going to write that one down. Anything else?
You know, we're getting close to our end time. So I just like to ask you, Jackie, is there any question that you were expecting or we should have asked that we didn't? Anything you want to share?
No, not necessarily. Not anything that comes to mind. Maybe just that I think dog mushing, I don't know that the big races will continue in the way that they have, because we are facing groups, for example, like PETA or that don't maybe understand the importance of these kinds of events in bringing back entire breeds of dogs and traditional cultures. And all that entails, but we have had demonstrations against major race sponsors, and I'm not affiliated with any race at all, just so you know, but it's caused sponsors to drop out, for example, of some of these races. The pots get smaller. It's harder for mushers and kennels to, if they're not subsistence like my family is, then they're commercial and they're sponsored kennels. And when you have sponsors drop out, it makes it a lot harder to continue a lifestyle where you are able to move this kind of awesome cultural legacy forward and maintain it. And so, so there's that. But what we are seeing is, I think there's an ecotourism angle that's important, and that could be explored a little more. And then, yeah, I think just in terms of thinking about the future for people who cannot actually maintain a team with a subsistence lifestyle, I think ecotourism might be something to kind of explore a little bit more about. And, you know, people are excited. People love dogs. The idea of a team is fantastic. So, yeah.
So we just had another question from Felix. What's your response to those that say the dogs are mistreated or live in harsh conditions? And is that related? Is that the basis of when you say there are demonstrations against the race? Is that the basis that people are?
Well, I think it's a misunderstanding. I think there will be people from any background with any type of dog where you will see, unfortunately, animal abuse. But in terms of people specifically targeting mushing, I think that is inaccurate. I think all they would have to do is see the dogs, see their excitement, see their happiness, see their overall health, the way that they're part of the family, the way they feel as being part of a team. And in fact, I would encourage them to watch Okpik stream. So thank you for that question.
Great. Anything else?
I'm
So
done.
I think that just about wraps it up. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much for being part of this. You know, we love having the film, but we also love being able to have somebody such as yourself who really understands what the films are presenting, to put a personal face on the stories and on the issues and share that with our audience.
Okay,
So
well, thank you both. And thank you, Jean, thank you, Merv, thank you, Celine. Thank you, I think Jess is in the background somewhere, I believe. The International Institute of Indigenous Resource Management, thank you so much. The Indigenous Film and Arts Festival, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, thank you, and the Denver American Indian Commission. So thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's ours.
Right.
So this was an opening night. Our next program is a week from tonight, Wednesday, October 21st. So you can go back to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science website where you registered for this program. You can register for the next. So please join us. Celine, do you have any closing remarks?
No, thank you all. Thank you. Again, we're so grateful for this partnership and being able to bring something that has traditionally been in person to your living rooms, your offices. We're very, very grateful for this partnership. Thank you to everybody who's joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share. I just put the link for next week's program. If you're interested, it's available in the chat. But other than that, I hope everybody has a fantastic night.
So I have one thing to add. Somehow through the magic of this platform and the know-how of DMNS, everybody who registered, who's online, will get a follow-up survey. So we would really appreciate if you can fill that out. It's the information will be shared with the museum and with our institute, and we really we read them and we take to heart when you have comments about what you liked, how we could improve it, topics that you want to see in the future. So if you can find the time to fill it out, we really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And when Jean says that we take it to heart, we absolutely do. Everything from the time in which we present these programs to the day of the week to the topics, that's all in large part to guest feedback. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks to all the folks in the audience who raised some really good I mean, really interesting questions. So that, we really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we couldn't do it without you.
Right.
Conversation.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint one last time. And as I'm doing that, Tim, I see that you're asking if this recording will be available online, and it absolutely will. You can go to YouTube and look up Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And usually it takes a day or two for us to be able to fully upload those. But this one, I believe the last Indigenous film discussion is up there, as well as any other DMNS virtual programs that we've done that are accessible to everybody. So again, thank you all. We're so very grateful. We hope that you all have a fantastic night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.